What's going on, guys? It is Broomstick here, back at y'all with another video. Today in this video, I really want to talk about getting older as a single Gen Z male and kind of what that life experience is like. I'm really going to quickly run through kind of like a professional, kind of like a side of things, and I'm going to quickly run through like the dating life side of things. I'm probably going to spend more time on the dating life stuff. So professionally, what I've noticed is people, bosses, hiring managers, they take you a lot more seriously because you're kind of getting these older years. It's probably easier to find better work and stuff of that nature. As a guy, you've kind of gone through more trials and tribulations. Maybe you have more degrees, more work experience, those kinds of things. But also, you've probably been kind of like, you've grown in the fire a bit. And as you guys might know, I've heard things about, especially in a lot of these STEM majors, where a guy might send out like 100 applications before he gets his first interview, and he might have a significant other or a wife who sends out, is in a similar field and sends out like 15 or 20, and then they get their first interview after that. And I've heard that all over Reddit. I've heard stories of all over that. And there's a lot of statistics that actually kind of convey this idea that women in their 20s right now in the current state of Western world are actually out earning guys, but it actually flips into the 30s. And a lot of people argue that that's because of, understandably, because women maybe get out of the work game and go more into the mother game. They want to have their children. But also, there's not a lot of people having children today. So I think a lot of that is due to just guys being in the trial by fire. Guys have to face a lot more accountability, and they have to grow from that accountability in the professional workspace. So as you expand your skill set and things like that, I think it's a little bit easier, just a little bit easier to get work. And I think it does get easier once you get into your 30s and 40s. But I'll also say this, your just automatic patience for work or your tolerance for work, it might not necessarily stay strong. I felt like I could do all-nighters and stuff when I was in my earlier 20s, but I feel like now that stuff is just like I feel like I do 4 hours of deep work and then I'm like, okay, I'm done. Like in my 8 hour job, um, I would hate it. Like I would hate it if I do actually 4 hours in my 8 hour job of doing actual deep work, because that means I would just go home and I'm cooked. Like I have no mental capacity to engage with my own creative projects, my own passion projects. I would just go home and I'd veg out some anime, some video games, and that'd just be it. But yeah, so that's kind of like the double-edged sword, I would say, in the professional world of getting older as a Gen Z male. Now let's talk about dating life. So high school and college, in my opinion, are your best times to really date. I think, but a lot of this is kind of it is lux and location based, right? It's luck and location based. So think about high school. My graduating class was maybe like 600 people. You could date maybe below someone below your class, but it's going to be hard because you don't have propinquity. What propinquity is it is the familiarity you build with being in the same room as someone or the same places, seeing someone in the same places, those kinds of things. It's that familiarity, that kind of inherent bond you just have, um, as a result of having to kind of see each other in the same places. So, only like, and let's say in this 600 people, 300 of those are guys. So then you got 300 people to choose from. And in a lot of Western countries, there's like weight problems. So, do you want to date like a torta or someone who's overweight? I don't. And I think the male gaze nowadays is as lenient as it's ever been. And what I mean by that is to be found as an attractive woman inside of the male gaze. I think two things you kind of need to do, and these are really the only two things I would say, is maintain like a good body fat, probably somewhere below like 28% or 30%. Obviously it depends. If you have like fantastic genetics, then you probably could go above, like if you have kind of like thick genetics, quote unquote. But the point is, maintain a good body fat, maintain like long or pretty hair, and that's all you really got to do. And I think as long as you don't have like chopped genetics or whatever, you're going to be like a 6 out of 10 or greater just by default doing those things. You could not even have the prettiest face or whatever, and you still be like a 6 out of 10 to most guys. Because I think the male gaze is just lenient or desperate. It's one of the two. Now, conversely, I've noticed that the female gaze has gotten very strict. I think with like dating apps, choosiness, those kinds of things, it's gotten to the point where the female gaze can get quite picky, and there's a lot of guys. If you're a 6 or a 7, you're kind of stuck in a looks purgatory where you're maybe found attractive, but you're maybe not attractive enough to be like they don't want to expend a hookup on you. A hookup comes with like baggage and history and those kinds of things they don't want to just use on any guy. They'd rather use that stuff on a guy they find very attractive. So maybe like the 8 or above guys. And the other thing too is if you are in that 6-7 category, you could easily get, stopped talking, like, just ghosted or whatever, because maybe a guy who's a 7.25 or 7.5 came around and those kinds of things. So just something to consider, I think, about the male gaze versus the female gaze nowadays. I think that we live in a world right now where the female gaze is as strict as it's ever been. And Gen Z men, you're feeling that pressure. I bet you right now, you're feeling that pressure right now. So I went on a few dates recently. I really just, I do like, I occasionally go to like a speed dating event thing. I met this 24-year-old girl there. We went out on a date, and man, you could even do, you just have fun with it. Maybe have some drinks. You even sit like next to her in a booth as opposed to sitting across from her. But even if you do all those things to kind of make it feel more like a casual, fun vibe, she's still at the end of the day going to treat that like it's a job interview. And I never really felt like that's how dating was at all ever like when I was in college. Me personally, I was a late bloomer. I didn't really get to date in high school, largely because of those things I mentioned. I was at a school where a lot of the girls were inner city school. A lot of girls were overweight, chop genetics. And then, that just kind of like brings up the market of, the girls who are not that stuff. They tend to go for like other guys or whatever. But then also, I wasn't at my best place. I didn't know anything about maxing out what genetic framework I had or looks maxing or anything like that. So naturally, it was just kind of, I had to learn by trial and error. But when I got to college, I did have some successful relationships, especially towards the end. And what I remember about those relationships is they just weren't like, they didn't, a lot of them started in propinquity. So it's like you kind of start off knowing each other or by friends, and then you start dating and smashing or whatever. And then, but I feel like dating as you're getting older, it's a lot more, what can you do for me? What as a guy can you provide for me? Can you provide jokes, entertainment, an experience, money, nights out, those kinds of things. Whereas in college, it was more like, hey, I enjoy this propinquity. Let's do this more. And I find you attractive. Those kinds of things. So I felt like girls were just a lot more down to date. Now, here's the other thing, too, is that honestly, it's just you have a better time. A lot of these girls in college, that's like the best they're ever going to look. I've looked at some of my exes recently who are, about the same age as me, elder Zoomers, and they're not getting better, y'all. They're getting much worse. And dare I even say, it seems like some of the guys they're dating is like they're dating down. Like I saw one of my exes, she was dating this guy. It's like this like short ethnic dude, and I was just kind of like, man, like it's just how things change. But she's also, I look at her and like, man, you don't look at all like what you used to look like. You used to be a piece of ass back in the day. So it's really strange how that works. There is just a human intersexual dynamic to this stuff that once you see it, you can't really unsee it. So it's a very like glass half full, glass half empty thing about getting older. Some things get easier. I would even say like, because, I went through the trial by fire with dating, and I went ahead like eventually figured out how to like ascend, lose my V card, those kinds of things. Dating is a lot easier now, but it's also just the options out there are so much shittier now. So I don't really have like much else to say about that for like a pro or a con. I think it's just a very tough place to be. And I'm almost coming to terms with that, like the best sex I'm ever going to get or whatever, the best, the best huzz, quote unquote, it's maybe passed me by, like my peak or whatever. I'm not entirely convinced that I'm just going to run into a situation where, you know, I'm just having a good time dating again. I think it's going to be a bit of a slog, kind of that job interview process. I don't think it'll necessarily be like how it ever was in college again. And I don't think it's as simple as just a, oh, date younger women, bro, because with what propinquity or like, you know, even if I go to these speed dating events or whatever, meet another 24 or younger girl, maybe even a 22, 21-year-old girl, you know, I'm still kind of meeting her in the context of a job interview, not really like she's in my same class, she's in my same club. I don't get to know the real her. She doesn't get to know the real me. Those kinds of things. So that's just something I really want to get out there. Another thing that's been on my mind too is if you're not careful, your professional world and your like work slog, your wage cage slog, that can really get in the way of your dating life. And like I remember I was on this government contract. I used to be a government employee for like a very small period of time. And those government jobs, it's really interesting because they are nice. Like it was a lot easier to get overtime. It was a lot easier to get like time sick, time off, that kind of stuff. There's reasons why people gravitate towards government jobs. I totally get that now. But at the same time, with things like Doge and the Trump administration, it kind of seems like they're trying to get rid of those kind of like quote unquote free ride kind of jobs, those kind of like easier jobs. They're kind of, which I don't know what to say about that. I see both the pros and cons of that. It's like obviously if you can get yourself in that role, that's great, right? But then if you are stuck on the outside and you have to go work in maybe exploitative corporate environment, then it could be quite difficult. So I don't really know what to say about that. I think it's one of those things where I wouldn't fret if it goes away because, you know, I had a nice, cushy government job on a, keep in mind, it was a contract set to expire. So I knew that I wasn't going to be at this cushy environment for forever. But so it's kind of like I'm okay with some of the government jobs going away because I don't exactly think people are entitled to getting paid more than what they're worth or getting more benefits than what they're worth and those kinds of things. But my point is, while I'm at this cushy government job, I still have like this contract I have to fulfill. If I fuck up, like I'd lose like a significant part of like pay at the end and stuff like that. And I was kind of on my last month there. And I remember I matched with this like piece, like this absolute piece, like this 24-year-old piece on Hinge. And she was really nice, like exchanged numbers, exchanged Instagrams and stuff. But man, I just never got around to like going out with her because I remember I was just so beaten down by like my boss and my job and just my boss was like holding that shit over my head with like, oh yeah, you know, your contract and not getting that bonus pay at the end because of your performance. And so I was just so mentally clouded. I didn't have like the time or the energy to go out with this baddie on Hinge, you know? So that's something I really just want to also mention out there where it's like be careful of how much your work life, your wage cage or whatever, how that impacts your ability to like date or live your best life or enjoy your life to the fullest. But I think I've said enough with this video, guys. Broomstick signing out. Peace.